So all that's great, and we're proud of all that. But today we're here because we get to add another #1 ranking to our list of successes. But this one is really, really meaningful. And not that the others aren't. You want to have entrepreneurship, you want to have a lean government, you want to have a strong economy. But today, Florida has earned the #1 ranking amongst all 50 states for protecting religious liberty. And that is something that matters. And if you go back to the founding of our country, religious liberty was basically the first freedom that the founding fathers sought to protect. And of course, religious freedom was part of the reason people even settled in the American colonies to begin with. So this is something that is central to the American experiment and central to our way of life, but it is something that has really been under assault in recent years, particularly over the last decade or so. And I'm just proud to say we have a strong record of protecting this first freedom throughout the state of Florida. I mean, just think of what we did to protect parents' rights in the state of Florida. Parents have a fundamental right to direct the education and upbringing of their children in this state, and that includes religious instruction and students' ability to practice faith. I also signed legislation requiring teachers in classrooms in Florida public school when they start the school day to set aside time for a moment of silence so that students have an opportunity to pray before the day's events happen. In 2020, when COVID-19 hit, you saw a concerted effort to target religious institutions for closure. I remember Fauci was always complaining about churches. And so you had a lot of places around the country, they'd have liquor stores open, but they would have churches closed. Now, we didn't do that in Florida at the state level, but you did have in those early days of COVID, people that were really, I think it was hysteria that was really taking over, that were trying to enforce closures based on local ordinances or emergency declarations, and even got to the point where there was one local jurisdiction that arrested a pastor in Florida. And so I think it was the next day I signed an executive order overriding all those local restrictions, saying that religious worship, going to church, that is not only an essential activity, in many ways the essential activity, and that is protected in the state of Florida. So not only did we put the kibosh on the movement to try to snuff out religious worship. And look, at first, maybe it was just people were scared, they didn't want to see. But I mean, if you look at how some of these governments clung to this for weeks and weeks and months, whereas they didn't mind that you could have a strip club open, but somehow people going singing in a choir on Sunday was like the big problem. There was an agenda behind that. So we snuffed that out very early on. And it's interesting because people talk about, oh, I moved to Florida, and I moved my business to Florida because I could, and that happens. We actually had people move churches to Florida. We had people that had congregations in places like Washington State that decided they're going to move their church. And look, not every parishioner was in the position to move, but some moved. And then they established a church here in the state of Florida. So we were proud on standing on the front lines during those days. Of course, we have signed legislation protecting folks' medical freedoms, particularly when there's religious objections to certain medications. We've also protected physician freedom of speech and physicians' ability to conduct themselves in a way that's consistent with their religious beliefs, particularly when they're being perhaps forced to perform procedures that they disagree with vehemently. That's something that's been done. We've also ensured that, and it's sad that we even have to do this, but we made sure that you can say a prayer before a high school football game. I mean, imagine that. They used to do that as a matter of course. They ended up in litigation in Florida when I became governor, and we've settled that and making clear that that is absolutely appropriate. And then, of course, after the October 7th attacks by Hamas against Israel, you saw really an ugly wave of anti-Semitism unleashed that really continues to this day. but in the state of Florida, Jewish students did not have to worry about having a Columbia University happen here, and we knew that that wouldn't happen. And we knew that that wouldn't happen because, quite frankly, if any university president allowed that to happen, they would no longer be university presidents in the state of Florida, and we would make sure that there was accountability very quickly. Last year, I signed legislation which established a statewide school chaplain program and authorized school districts and charter schools to allow volunteer chaplains to be on school campuses and provide additional counseling support for students. You know, it's been, the Founding Fathers, when they adopted the First Amendment, they were trying to prevent government from endorsing a particular religious sect or denomination. They were not trying to say that you could not have faith involved in public institutions. That was never anything that they believed in. And in fact, I think that they viewed it just the opposite. And George Washington said many times, that you needed that. So that had kind of gotten perverted, and it got to the point where in schools, public schools, okay, yes, the public school system in Sarasota is not going to establish Episcopalianism as what people are instructed in, but the flip side is not that there should be no mention of God at all in school, and that people are somehow have to smother their faith. So we've really worked to kind of rebalance this in the direction that the Founding Fathers originally intended, and I think people are better for it, and I think religious freedom is better for it.